September 8th, 1380, the field of Kulikovo in what is now modern Russia. Two armies are gathered, readying for battle. One army is composed of an alliance of semi-independent Russian principalities held together by the command of Dmitry Ivanovich, the Grand Prince of Moscow. Arrayed against Dmitri's forces was a larger host of the Mongolo-Turkic Golden Horde. At this army's head was Mamai, a formidable Beyler Bey who, while never formally bearing the title of king or khan, was among the most politically influential men of the Khanate. Mamai regularly deposed or uplifted subservient khans, and ruled as he saw fit. One of these puppet khans was present with Mamai, Tulak, also called Muhammad Bolak. Supporting Mamai besides the cavalry of the Golden Horde were contingents of professional European mercenaries and other units of Cumans and Circassians. Mamai, however, only controlled the western wing of the Horde, which for simplicity's sake by historians is often dubbed the Blue Horde. Numbers given for the combatants present that day vary wildly, but many historians agree that both sides fielded many thousands of men. Mamai's host outnumbered the Russian princes to some degree. Earlier in the mid-1200s, the Mongols had conquered much of the Kievan Rus. The status quo before 1380 largely saw the dominance of the Turkified Mongol successor state known as the Golden Horde. The reasons for this confrontation are somewhat disputed and varied, but at its core was the desire of many Russian princes, especially Dmitry of Moscow, to change the conditions of the Golden Horde's demands of vassalage and tribute. Mamai's purpose in this military expedition was to reassert Golden Horde hegemony over these rebellious Russian vassals. While other history tubers have covered this pivotal battle of medieval Russian history blow by blow, I am merely going to focus on one contentious aspect of this engagement. According to the early chronicle/epic work, The Tale of the Battle with Mamai, as a prelude before the battle, a pre-agreed single combat between two champions occurred. From the Russian ranks rode Alexander Peresvet, a soldier turned Orthodox monk in service to Prince Dmitry. Out from the Golden Horde came riding Timur Mirza, a seasoned nomad fighter. In many Russian stories, Timur is called Chelubey. While the battle and its outcome undoubtedly happened, the duel between these two champions which preceded it is of questionable historicity. There are many questions on this supposed duel, not merely the details, but if it occurred at all. The combatants remain historical enigmas, with Chelubey possibly being a fiction. Yet why is this possibly fictional duel featured so prominently in the Russian national historical mythos? We will attempt to answer these questions today on Historical Detour. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Consider pledging to my Patreon to support more videos on history off the beaten path. How these duelists were armored has been depicted in numerous and contradictory ways. Alexander has been shown or described wearing little more than his monkish robes, clad in mail or plate, or even pristine gilded armor. Chelubey likewise has been shown wearing simple if fine pelts and furs, or even ornately decorated metal armor. The mounts of the riders are depicted inconsistently. Alexander has been shown in either a white or even dark steed, while Chelubey is often shown riding a chestnut brown or reddish mount. The duel begins. Both Alexander and Chelubey barreled forth on their steeds, hurtling towards one another, lances raised. What occurred next is uncertain, but the duel appears to have ended as quickly as it began. Chelubey is fatally transfixed by Alexander's spear, dropping to the ground lifeless. However, many accounts then state the warrior monk Alexander is likewise fatally wounded that same instant by Chelubey's lance. However, a legend states that, due to Alexander's body supposedly staying in the saddle, the Russian army took this to heart as a sign of good fortune or divine favor. However, one epic poem retelling the battle has Alexander alive during the beginning of the battle, bellowing this bellicose pronouncement to his comrades. Quote, "Brothers, now is the time for all old men to get young, and for all young men to gain honor, and to test their backs." End quote. Alexander does appear, though, to have fallen that day, as he finds no mention in later events of the period. Ultimately, Dmitry and the princes were victorious in what would be known as the Battle of Kulikovo that day. Dmitry even gained the epithet of Donskoy for his victory near the Don River, in a similar fashion to the ancient Roman Scipio earning the title of Africanus for military victories in Africa. For Mamai and the Golden Horde, this upended generations of uncontested Horde dominance and signaled a decades-long decline of Khanate influence over the Russian princedoms. Mamai would die not long after in Crimea in exile, assassinated by political enemies. The primary sources for the Battle of Kulikovo come from pro-princely Russian sources, with any possible historical accounts from the Golden Horde recounting this battle not surviving. While a general picture of the battle and possible duel can be gleaned, there is much that cannot be known for certain. The purpose of these chroniclers was to not retell past events without bias, but rather in many cases to highlight the righteousness and triumph of Moscow's prince and Russian Orthodox Christians over the Muslim Khanate. Of the two combatants, the warrior monk Alexander is well attested in the historical record, although many biographical details have been obscured by the passage of time. However, some of his time as a monk and death at Kulikovo can be ascertained with some certainty. One epic poem account of Kulikovo has Peresvet not as a monk, but as a man of the boyar class, further adding confusion to Alexander's precise background. What little we do know is that before the fateful battle, Alexander resided at the Moscow monastery headed by Sergius of Radonez, a future Orthodox saint. Sergius apparently not only provided his spiritual blessing to Prince Dimitri's campaign, but also lent him 2 ordained monks. They would serve not merely as spiritual support, but as men-at-arms. The duo included the aforementioned Alexander and Rodion Oshliabaya. The two men may have even been relatives, with both apparently serving as distinguished soldiers before their monastic lives. Rodion's recorded life is even sketchier than Alexander's. Rodion is recorded as dying either at Kulikovo or years later. However, the two are interred together at Simonov Monastery. Within Russian Orthodoxy, Peresvet would be made a saint. Sources for biographical details on Chelubey's life, in contrary, are virtually non-existent. His recorded life both begins and ends at Kulikovo, meaning his existence is far less certain. Even his exact ethnicity has been subject to various writers' whims, being made a Tatar, Turk, Mongol, or other Asian group stereotypically categorized as nomadic. This is to be expected from hagiographic Russian sources. Due to both being opposed to the princes and a presumed heathen, Chelubey's reputation in Russian posterity is quite poor. The most popular accounts of the battle also serve as literary works, with fantastical details throughout, from impossible army sizes to supernatural interference. The literary flourish of a foreshadowing duel would not be surprising. One issue when discussing this battle is the fact that, according to several accounts, the battle began suddenly. When the Russians made a surprise march on Mamai's position, the battle began, negating the likelihood of a pre-agreed duel of the champions. This supposed duel has been molded for propagandistic purposes, be it for the Romanov czars or communist rule. The anachronistic ideals of a nationalized, centralized, patriotic state of Russia, czarist or communist, has been placed upon this medieval battle. Alexander Peresvet, to many modern Russians, embodies independence, while Chelubey is cast as a symbol of oppressive rule from the Eastern Golden Horde, which the Russian people liberated themselves from. Whether or not this personal duel occurred is irrelevant. As the story has shifted from one of Christian triumph to a national foundation, this tale of a warrior monk and nomad champion will be interpreted by the wider societies that retell it.